Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Off Script, the podcast where we take you deep into the world behind the media we love, whether it's movies, series, or animation. Today, you're here with me, Alex.
And Emily. Today we're going to ride into the Wild West together. And it's not just because the animation is beautiful and the music is amazing, right, Alex? This one's deep. We're talking about an animated movie many of you probably saw as kids and remember thinking, whoa, that horse is so handsome.
That's right. Today, we're talking about Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron from DreamWorks. It might look like a typical animated horse film at first glance, but behind that DreamWorks-style fun lies a much deeper message.
Even though America is a country less than 300 years old, its history is full of conflict, colonization, and the suppression of freedom.
Especially for Native Americans, or as we used to hear them called, Indians. They were here long before Europeans arrived, but once settlers came and started taking land, it led to a long, brutal war, one whose impact still echoes today.
And DreamWorks didn't overlook this. Spirit became like an artistic apology, a way to express the pain that Native Americans and African Americans suffered, often erased from mainstream history. And they chose to tell that story through a wild horse.
Exactly. This young horse was born in a herd roaming the vast plains of the American West, around Colorado or Montana. It represents freedom, resistance, and ownership of the land. The story was inspired by real events from the early 19th century, around 1861 to 1865, when the Western frontier was still considered the Wild West.
Yes, the Old West was an extreme landscape. Thick pine forests, endless grasslands, steep canyons, and scorching deserts. It was home to Native American tribes, each spread across different parts of the region, and they weren't alone. Mustangs, or wild horses, shared the land too.
And these weren't just any horses. They were descendants of Spanish colonial horses that escaped and adapted to the wild. Super cool, super tough. True to the name, Spirit.
Speaking of Europeans, once they settled in, they began using the land for ranching, farming, and hunting native wildlife, like bison, beavers, and foxes for their pelts. This created new roles like cowboys and fur traders. Sounds romantic, but in reality, the hunting and land grabbing devastated ecosystems and native cultures. And because laws didn't reach that far, life there was wild. Survival of the fittest. People even turned to crime, with deadly gun duels and bodies hidden in canyons, lost forever.
What settlers saw as savage land was actually the homeland of native wildlife and people who had lived in harmony with nature. In the movie, Spirit grows up to become leader of his herd, until one day he's captured and sold to the U.S. cavalry, led by Colonel George Custer, a real historical figure. That's when the story shifts into historical drama. Native Americans and African slaves were both forced into the Civil War, but their motivations were different. African slaves joined hoping to gain citizenship, while Native Americans joined hoping to reclaim rights to their homeland.
Wow, I never knew that. That's really heartbreaking, being pushed into a war they didn't want.
Right? Both the horse and the people are captured and forced to be tamed in harsh, even cruel ways. There's a scene where Spirit is roped, his mane is cut, and they try to brand him with a hot iron, marked US, which doesn't just stand for United States, but can also be read as us.
As if saying, you belong to us now.
Exactly. From a historical perspective, it represents cultural assimilation, when the state or majority forces minorities to abandon their way of life, like when Native children were sent to boarding schools, had to cut their hair, wear Western clothes, were forbidden from speaking their native languages, and had to speak only English. Those who resisted were punished, sometimes fatally.
It's like cutting off their roots and saying you have to be like us to fit in.
And that hurts, not just in the movie. This trauma has been passed down through generations in real life, too.
But Spirit refuses to give in. He fights back. He doesn't let anyone control him, no matter the torture, the separation from his herd, or the pressure to change who he is. He always stays true to himself.
Our favorite scene is when he frees the other horses from the military camp. It echoes the abolition of slavery in the U.S. after the Civil War. You'll notice the animators chose to color most horses in the film with brown, dark, or non-white tones. This symbolizes people of color, not just African Americans, but other ethnic groups with darker skin who were historically oppressed.
And these horses represent enslaved African Americans forced to work on cotton, sugar, and tobacco plantations, first during colonization, and later during Western expansion, which is the backdrop of this film.
Just to add, the American Civil War was sparked by ideological differences between two sides, the North, or the Union, which supported the abolition of slavery, mostly due to industrialization replacing the need for manual labor, and the South, or the Confederacy, which still relied on slave labor for their agricultural economy.
And when Spirit meets Little Creek, a young Lakota Native American, it becomes clear that wild horses and Native people instinctively understand each other because they've both been hurt in the same way.
There's a scene I remember so clearly when Spirit is chained without food or water for 3 days, and Little Creek, captured as a prisoner, is suffering too. That moment is powerful. They understand each other without needing words. They become a symbol of interracial friendship. It's like saying, if we just listen, talk, and try to understand each other, maybe the world wouldn't have had to be so violent in the past.
Exactly. And Spirit doesn't speak a single word throughout the movie, yet we understand everything through his expressions, eyes, and the music.
The soundtrack deserves huge credit, especially Bryan Adams' Here I Am and Sound the Bugle. They don't just sound good, they speak from the heart.
This movie might look like it's for kids, but it speaks to adults too. It's a lesson in mutual respect and in valuing every life, whether you're a horse, a Black person, a Native American, or anyone else.
And it teaches us that freedom isn't just the absence of chains. It's the ability to be who you truly are without someone else dictating it.
Because in the end, the world doesn't belong to just one kind of person. Every life matters.
Thanks so much for staying with us to the end. We hope you'll revisit Spirit with a deeper perspective now.
And don't forget to drop your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time on Off Script. Bye-bye.